Namaskar, a warm welcome to World News, an Indian perspective on All India Radio. This is Renu Kataria and with me is Anita Anand bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. India and Japan ink 6 agreements in areas including cybersecurity, wastewater management and clean energy after 14th India-Japan Annual Summit between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida in New Delhi. Prime Minister Modi says India presents limitless possibilities for Make in India for the world, makes commitment to Japanese companies to extend all possible support for them. Russia announces use of its hypersonic missile Kinzhal for first time in military operation in Ukraine. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk announces agreement with Russia on 10 humanitarian corridors. Bulgarian Prime Minister Kirill Petkov rules out military aid to Ukraine. Indian Home Minister Amit Shah calls for strengthening of security grid to ensure zero cross-border infiltration and elimination of terrorism completely from Jammu and Kashmir. Abu Dhabi Film Commission invited to set up an office in India. Indian Information and Broadcasting Secretary Apurva Chandra says India and UAE to sign a co-production agreement soon to further cement strong ties. And in All England Open Badminton Championship 2022, Lakshya Sen cruised into the finals of men's singles after a nail-biting semi-final clash. As we start the bulletin, we appeal to our listeners to stay safe from COVID-19 by following these 4 simple steps. Get fully vaccinated, wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki doori for social distancing and focus on hand and face hygiene. And now the news in detail. India and Japan signed 6 agreements in the areas including cybersecurity, wastewater management and clean energy after the 14th India-Japan Annual Summit between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida in New Delhi on Saturday. Both the leaders held productive talks and discussed ways to boost economic and cultural linkages between the two countries. Mr. Modi and Mr. Kishida also held delegation-level talks. They also exchanged views on regional and global issues of mutual interest so as to advance the partnership for peace, stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond. India and Japan have multifaceted cooperation within the ambit of their special strategic and global partnership. After the annual summit, both the leaders signed a joint statement. In his press statement, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said, "Today, India presents limitless possibilities for Make in India for the world." He said, in this context, Japanese companies have been our brand ambassadors for a long time.
आज भारत मेक इन इंडिया फॉर द वर्ल्ड के लिए असीम संभावनाएं प्रस्तुत करता है। इस संदर्भ में जापानीज कंपनीज बहुत समय से एक प्रकार से हमारी ब्रांड एम्बेसडर्स रही है। हमारे बीच टेक्नोलॉजी और इनोवेशन सेक्टर्स में पार्टनरशिप में नए आयाम जुड़ रहे हैं। हम जापानी कंपनीज को भारत में अनुकूल माहौल उपलब्ध कराने के लिए प्रतिबद्ध हैं। आज लॉन्च किया गया इंडिया जापान इंडस्ट्रियल कॉम्पिटिटिवनेस पार्टनरशिप रोड मैप इसके लिए एक कारगर मैकेनिज्म सिद्ध होगा।
Mr. Modi said Japan's cooperation in India's flagship projects such as the dedicated freight corridor and the Mumbai-Ahmedabad high-speed rail has been remarkable.
मुंबई अहमदाबाद हाई स्पीड रेल प्रोजेक्ट में अच्छी प्रगति हो रही है। दोनों देश इस पर वन टीम वन प्रोजेक्ट की अप्रोच के साथ काम कर रहे हैं। यह प्रोजेक्ट भारत जापान पार्टनरशिप का एक बेहतरीन उदाहरण है।
The Prime Minister said India is grateful to Japan for this contribution. He said there has been good progress in the Mumbai-Ahmedabad high-speed rail project. He said both India and Japan understand the importance of a secure, trusted, predictable and stable energy supply. Mr. Modi said it is imperative to achieve the goal of sustainable economic growth and tackle the problem of climate change. He said India-Japan clean energy partnership will prove to be a decisive step in this direction.
भारत और जापान दोनों ही सिक्योर, ट्रस्टेड, प्रिडिक्टेबल और स्टेबल एनर्जी सप्लाई के महत्व को समझते हैं। ये सस्टेनेबल इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ के लिए, उस लक्ष्य को पाने और क्लाइमेट चेंज की समस्या से निपटने के लिए बहुत ही अनिवार्य है। हमारी क्लीन एनर्जी पार्टनरशिप इस दिशा में लिया गया एक निर्णायक कदम साबित होगा.
The Prime Minister expressed happiness that Japan will raise its investment target in India to 5 trillion yen or 3.2 lakh crore rupees over the next 5 years.
मुझे प्रसन्नता है कि हमने 2014 में निर्धारित 3.5 ट्रिलियन जापानीज येन का इन्वेस्टमेंट टारगेट पार कर लिया. अब और आने वाले 5 वर्षों में 5 ट्रिलियन येन, 5 ट्रिलियन येन मतलब करीब 3,20,000 करोड़ रुपए का नया टारगेट तय किया है.
Mr. Modi said the world is still grappling with COVID-19 and its side effects. He said there are still hurdles in the process of global economic recovery. He said geopolitical events are also presenting new challenges. In his statement, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said the whole world has been shaken today due to many disturbances. He said it is very important for India and Japan to have a close partnership. Mr. Kishida said both of them expressed their views and talked about the military operation of Russia into Ukraine. The Japanese Prime Minister emphasized on a peaceful solution on the basis of international law. Mr. Modi and Mr. Kishida also addressed India-Japan Economic Forum towards realizing the unparalleled potential of the economic partnership. Mr. Modi spoke about reforms taken by his government and invited Japanese companies to invest in India. The Prime Minister made a commitment to Japanese companies, saying that his government will extend all possible support for their establishment in India. He said the relationship between the two countries stands on a strong foundation and added that both stand to benefit by it.
Progress, prosperity and partnership भारत-जापान संबंधों के मूल में है. दोनों देशों के आर्थिक संबंधों को आगे बढ़ाने में इंडिया जापान बिजनेस लीडर्स फोरम की महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका है. मैं इसके लिए आप सबका अभिनंदन करता हूं, शुभकामनाएं देता हूं.
This is Mr. Kishida's first visit to India since he took charge of the office last year. He arrived in New Delhi this afternoon on a 2-day visit. Union Minister for Railways and IT, Ashwini Vaishnaw, received the visiting dignitary at the airport.
Indian Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla has said that guided by strong political will from both sides, the India-Japan partnership has made significant progress in the last few years, covering entire gamut of mutual engagement. Briefing media in New Delhi, Mr. Shringla said India's relations with Japan has occupied special space. He said Japan is one of the few countries with which India has a system of annual summit. The Foreign Secretary said as two major powers in the Indo-Pacific region, both the Prime Ministers held detailed discussions on regional and global issues. He said both leaders held discussions on entire range of areas including economic cooperation, cooperation for the development of northeastern region of India, and digital cooperation and skill development. Mr. Shringla said as India and Japan are two major powers in the Indo-Pacific, the Prime Ministers also had detailed discussions on regional and global issues. He said both leaders concurred that defence and security ties have strengthened over the last few years and both are engaging with like-minded partners in various regional and multilateral fora for achieving shared objectives. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on India-Japan ties for a better tomorrow. We are joined by Skand Ranjan Thayal, former diplomat, and Simran Sodhi, journalist.
Ambassador Thayal, when you see this visit of the Japanese Prime Minister and we see this escalation of depth in the India-Japan relationship, how do you look at this visit and how do you look at this bilateral relationship that we have seen growing in these last few years?
India-Japan friendship really goes back decades. This is the 70th year of the establishment of diplomatic relations. And we have seen that both India and Japan are democracies. Governments keep changing, but the intensity of India-Japan relations is ever strong. After coming to power, Prime Minister Narendra Modi since 2014 has injected a new energy in this relationship. This will be the 14th summit of Indian and Japanese Prime Ministers, which will being held today and tomorrow. It is very important because Prime Minister Kishida's, it will be really the first substantial meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida is familiar with India because he has been Foreign Minister of Japan and also briefly Defense Minister of Japan under Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. And as we all know, the India-Japan relationship really became very strong strategically when Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was Prime Minister of Japan in his 2 terms. There was always a very strong economic content to India-Japan relationship, but over the years and particularly about 8-9 years, the strategic content has become very, very important. And Japan is now India's special strategic and global partnership, which was announced when Prime Minister Modi visited Japan for the 9th summit.
Mr. Tyal, we also see that the visit of the Japanese Prime Minister is happening at a time when the Ukraine crisis is still going on. And we also see that both India and Japan are part of the Quad. Do you feel that the Quad, for example, gives both India and Japan an opportunity to deal with global crisis as we see in Ukraine in a unified fashion? Or do you feel that sometimes the individual interests of a nation may outweigh what a unified approach might be?
It is important to note that Quad, the quadrilateral forum between India, Japan, United States, and Australia, has been established in the context of Indo-Pacific. And the arena of its work, its joint thinking, joint strategization is limited for Indo-Pacific. And the crisis, what we are witnessing now in Ukraine is primarily a European phenomenon. Some analysts have said that this is the start of a second Cold War in Europe. And it is very important that India and our partners in Quad understand and insulate the Indo-Pacific strategic issues from European strategic issues. And we also note that Japan is a military alliance partner, defense alliance partner of United States, as also is Australia. So India is non-aligned, and India has its own relationship with Russia, which is a very old relationship, very established relationship, and strategically a very important relationship. And it will be important for India's partners to fully understand that if India is strong, economically strong, militarily strong, whether we get our armaments from US, from Russia, from Israel, or from Japan, it doesn't matter. It is that Quad becomes strong, democratic forces become strong, and this will be perhaps an important aspect of the discussions between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, that Japan should fully appreciate and understand the logic and the compulsions behind India's position on the Ukraine issue.
Ambassador Tyal, we've also seen that the India-Japan relationship, and you mentioned it earlier, that the relationship has had a very strong economic tie to it. We've seen that Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who was the Prime Minister before of Japan, in 2014 had announced 3.5 trillion yen in investment and financing over 5 years during his visit to India. And Prime Minister Kishida is probably going to reinforce the security economic ties. It is expected that he will announce a plan to invest 5 trillion yen, which is about $42 billion in India over the next 5 years during this visit. And this is according to a Japanese newspaper. How important is this economic aspect to the India-Japan relationship, and the fact that Japan is also investing into India heavily as India goes through this economic growth?
Japan-India economic relationship really has 3 aspects: one of trade, one of investment, and one of the overseas direct assistance, which is provided by JICA, the Japanese International Cooperation Agency, to India. Trade between India and Japan is of the order of about $17 billion, but it has not been growing as rapidly as was expected. And also, the balance is heavily in favor of Japan, which needs to be addressed. There is a comprehensive economic partnership agreement which was signed and became operational in 2011, but its results have not been as good as expected. So more needs to be done to enhance India-Japan trade. On the investment aspect, Japan is the fifth largest investor in India with a cumulative investment of almost $34 billion. Yes, Japanese companies were very keen to come to India, and there was a move in Japan to shift some of their production from China because Japanese companies were becoming over-dependent on China. But unfortunately, much of this shift of Japanese companies from China has been towards Vietnam, towards Indonesia and other ASEAN countries, and not towards India. We in India are very much conscious of this, and ease of doing business is being constantly improved. The government and Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself is very, very conscious to push in that direction, and hopefully this will happen. Japanese investors are by nature more cautious and more conservative. And what is holding them back? We should also note that 2 or 3 very major Japanese investments in India have gone badly against the Japanese companies. One was their major investment in Ranbaxy pharmaceutical company, and another was in the Tata Mobile Group, Tata Docomo. Both have gone very bad. But Japanese investors like SoftBank are investing heavily in our startup sector, in our IT sector, and perhaps more investment will come in that sector, whereas the government of India, the people of India, want more investment in the manufacturing sector. If I talk about the ODA part, the Overseas Development Assistance part, the total assistance from Japan to India has been of the order of $20 billion US, and the effort is to strengthen India's infrastructure. We see that the Delhi Metro was financed partially by Japanese ODA, and we see how it has transformed urban transportation, not only in Delhi, but in other cities of India. The Ahmedabad-Mumbai high-speed rail has been an initiative of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It has gone a little slow because of the land issues, but the meeting of the 2 prime ministers today and tomorrow will give it a boost. And also, Japanese are committing a lot of assistance to Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, Chennai-Bangalore Industrial Corridor, and all these infrastructure projects will go to make India stronger and build a Atmanirbhar Bharat.
Mr. Pal, we also see that in 2017, a decision was taken to establish the India-Japan Act East Forum. The objective is to coordinate development projects in northeastern parts of India in areas of connectivity, forest management, disaster risk reduction and capacity building. And we have seen that several projects, including the upgradation of highways in Meghalaya, Tripura and Mizoram is underway. Do you feel the fact that Japan is also coordinating with India over the development in the northeastern state also lends this India-Japan relationship a unique advantage, a uniqueness to it?
Very much so. And if we look at the list of projects which are being executed all over India with the Japanese cooperation and collaboration and assistance, a very large number of important projects are in the northeastern states of India. Many of them are almost complete, like roads between Guwahati and Shillong, etc. And many more projects are under execution. Yes, Japan is a strong partner in our Act East policy, but because of very good reasons, India has not joined the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which was piloted by ASEAN with the membership of Japan, China, Australia, etc. And Japanese are a little disappointed with that. And again, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will surely explain or clarify and give our reasons why India found it difficult to join RCEP, because Japan has always been advocating India's joining the RCEP. Another issue there would be this change in government in Myanmar, because our entire Act East policy was also based on road linkage towards Thailand through Myanmar. But after the army coup, things have become slow there. And that is another difficulty which India and Japan will certainly discuss.
With these comments, we bring today's discussion to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates around the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
Welcome back to World News. The Russian military says it used its latest hypersonic missile Kinzhal for the first time to combat during its military operation in Ukraine. Spokesman for the Russian Defense Ministry, Major General Igor Konashenkov, said the hypersonic missiles destroyed an underground warehouse storing missiles and aviation ammunition of Ukrainian troops in the western Ivano-Frankivsk region. Konashenkov also said that the Russian forces used the anti-ship missile system Bastion to strike Ukrainian military facilities near the Black Sea port of Odessa. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk on Saturday announced that 10 humanitarian corridors have been agreed with the Russians. They include a corridor from the besieged port city of Mariupol, several in the Kyiv region and many in the Lushansk region. She also announced plans to deliver humanitarian aid to the city of Kherson, which is currently under control of the Russian forces. In his nightly video address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russian forces are blockading the largest cities with the goal of creating such miserable conditions that Ukrainians will cooperate. He said the Russians are preventing supplies from reaching surrounded cities in central and southeastern Ukraine.
Bulgarian Prime Minister Kirill Petkov has ruled out providing military aid to Ukraine. However, he said that his country, a NATO ally, will continue to provide humanitarian assistance. Petkov said this at a news conference in the Bulgarian capital with U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin on Saturday. Bulgaria, which does not border Ukraine but has received thousands of refugees, has agreed to host new contingent of NATO troops as part of the alliance's push to reinforce its eastern flank. That contingent includes about 150 U.S. Army infantry soldiers. Union Home Minister Amit Shah reviewed the security situation in Jammu with Lieutenant Governor Manoj Sinha and senior officers of Union government as well as Jammu and Kashmir administration. The Home Minister appreciated the improvement in the security situation, reduction in terror incidents from 417 in 2018 to 229 in 2021, and decrease in number of security forces personnel martyred from 91 in 2018 to 42 in 2021. Mr. Shah emphasized on proactive operations against terrorists and denying them safe haven or financial support. The Home Minister said the security grid should be further strengthened to ensure zero cross-border infiltration and to eliminate terrorism completely in order to achieve Prime Minister's vision of a peaceful and prosperous Jammu and Kashmir.
Indian Information and Broadcasting Secretary Apurva Chandra on Saturday interacted with Abu Dhabi Film Commission and filmmakers from India and United Arab Emirates. He appreciated the proactive measures taken by the UAE government in promoting films and media in the country. Mr. Chandra said with strong cultural ties between India and UAE, there is a lot of scope for mutual cooperation. He invited Abu Dhabi Film Commission to set up an office in India. The Secretary also stated that very shortly India and UAE will sign a co-production agreement between the two countries to further cement the strong ties. Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has thanked Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Government of India for help in evacuating Bangladeshi nationals from Ukraine. In a letter to Prime Minister Modi, Ms. Sheikh Hasina expressed her thanks for India's assistance in rescuing and evacuating some Bangladeshi nationals along with Indians who were stranded in Sumy Oblast, Ukraine. The UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, has said a Russia-Ukraine conflict has sparked Europe's gravest refugee crisis since World War II. UNHCR, in its latest figures released on Friday, said more than 3.2 million people have fled Ukraine. In a paper issued by the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said around a quarter of Ukraine's 44 million people have been forced to leave from their homes. According to the agency, Ukraine is fast on course in just 3 weeks toward the levels of displacement from Syria's devastating war, which has driven about 13 million people from their homes both in the country and abroad. Russia's request to freeze a ban on its soccer teams ahead of next week's World Cup qualifying playoffs was denied. International Federation of Association Football, FIFA, said the Court of Arbitration for Sport, CAS, dismissed the Russian Soccer Federation's bid for an urgent interim ruling to freeze the ban pending a full appeal which would come within weeks. The CAS decision means Russia will not be able to play Poland in World Cup qualifying on coming Thursday.
Australia's Great Barrier Reef is suffering widespread and severe coral bleaching due to high ocean temperatures, according to a report by Great Barrier Reef Marine Authority, which manages the world's largest coral reef ecosystem. Bleaching has been detected across the marine park. The 35th International Suraj Kund Crafts Mela was inaugurated by Haryana Governor Bandaru Dattatreya and Chief Minister Manohar Lal and Lieutenant Governor of Jammu and Kashmir Manoj Sinha on Saturday evening. Mr. Sinha joined the inaugural ceremony online. Mr. Dilshod Akhatov, the ambassador of Uzbekistan, the partner country, and the Union Minister of State Krishan Pal Gurjar, among others, attended the inaugural ceremony. The fair is being organized after a gap of 2 years due to COVID-19. It will continue till 4th of April. In All England Open Badminton Championship 2022, Lakshya Sen cruises into the finals of the men's singles after a nail-biting semi-final match. First game was won by Lakshya Sen by 21-13, while second game was won by Li Zijia by 21-12, and the third game was won by 21-19. Meanwhile, India's women's doubles duo of Gayatri Gopichand and Teresa Jolly will be up against Changshu Xian and Seng Zhu in the women's semi-final match on Saturday.
Meanwhile, Indian Sports Minister Anurag Thakur has congratulated shuttler Lakshya Sen on entering finals of the All England Open Badminton. In a tweet, Mr. Thakur said this is truly historic. He conveyed best wishes to Lakshya Sen for the finale.
And now let's take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Let's take a look at the press reports on China. Xinhua reports that the video call between U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping was candid and in-depth but gave little detail about Ukraine. The report said that President Xi expressed the wish that the war was not happening but gave no sign of what Chinese leaders' intentions were towards support for Moscow. Beijing's readout of the call did not suggest any Chinese role in ending the war. According to Reuters, a Chinese aircraft carrier sailed through the sensitive Taiwan Strait on Friday. Taiwan's defense ministry said just hours before the Chinese and U.S. presidents' talks were due.
Quick at the headlines once again. India and Japan inked 6 agreements in areas including cybersecurity, wastewater management and clean energy after 14th India-Japan Annual Summit between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida in New Delhi. Prime Minister Modi says India presents limitless possibilities for Make in India for the world, makes commitment to Japanese companies to extend all possible support for them. Russia announces use of its hypersonic missile Kinzhal for the first time in military operation in Ukraine. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk announces agreement with Russia on 10 humanitarian corridors. Bulgarian Prime Minister Kirill Petkov rules out military aid to Ukraine. Indian Home Minister Amit Shah calls for a strengthening of security grid to ensure zero cross-border infiltration and elimination of terrorism completely from Jammu and Kashmir. Abu Dhabi Film Commission invited to set up an office in India. Indian Information and Broadcasting Secretary Apurva Chandra says India and UAE to sign a co-production agreement soon to further cement strong ties. And in All England Open Badminton Championship 2022, Lakshya Sen cruised into the finals of men's singles after a nail-biting semi-final clash. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favourite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artiste from Cuba. And with that, we end this bulletin.